job searching. And Rutledge expects another big surge in workers forced into retirement this year. Today, those that still have their jobs can find that even carefully planned retirement strategies may need revising given all the market turmoil. David Ammon is a financial advisor with Edward Jones.
When they see their accounts fall down in value, it's something that they really worry about, whether or not they're going to be able to retire the way they want or whether or not they can stay retired.
So he's checking in and reviewing plans.
Asking them how much longer would we have to work in order to live the retirement we want, or what sacrifices would we have to make to retire now.
Encouraging them to make choices while they still have options. In Washington, I'm Kimberly Adams for Marketplace.
This month was supposed to be about prom and graduation and
Hi, Lori.
How are you?
I'm doing okay. All
Yeah.
right. Yeah. I get a little cabin fever.
Old sheets.
I do that in the
Stuff like that. So I wanted to get on my seat.
Thank you for reminding me because I didn't do that when I stuck them in the ground. So I'll go do that.
Eggshells.
With all these background choices.
I know.
If you use a Chromebook, you have no choices with the Chromebook.
Oh.
Yeah.
I think you need to share that dark screen with me. Who needs to share it? Nick
I'll
or
send-
Justin?
I'll send it to you.
Thanks.
Send it to me too, please. Chris Merritt.
We had made it, or I got my husband to make it.
And
I really like it. It's way better than the white one.
It
Yep.
worked.
Yep.
There's two versions of it, so get both. Like one's a lighter and one's a darker version of the same thing.
Yeah, David
Right.
has the lighter.
Depends on what kind of
The lighting.
yeah.
it matches my
Rack.
mood. Look how dark I'm feeling at the time.
Right.
Oh, I messed up my. Okay, I messed up my camera, so I'm gonna pop out and pop back in.
It's 7:00, Amber.
Okay. Are we still waiting for a few people though, right?
Laurel's not in.
Yeah, there's Jim.
Amy's pop. Oh, there she is. Amy's back.
Here's Jim. Okay, and then Scott had said that he would be a little bit late. So.
Oh, I saw him here a few minutes
Okay.
ago.
I think, yeah, I think he's like had some other things going. That,
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay.
There we go.
Okay. I need to make sure I can see the participant view again. Okay. In case of public comment. Okay. Should we go ahead and get started then?
Go for it.
All right. Good evening. I'd like to call to order the May 4th, 2020 regular board meeting of the State College Area School District Board of Directors. And I would like to ask everyone to please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. I'd like to welcome everyone this evening who is viewing with us remotely. And I'd like to announce that the board held an executive session April 27th regarding negotiations. Board members with an agenda before you, are there any changes to the agenda as presented? Okay, seeing none, Dr. O'Donnell will now review some housekeeping items regarding the online format.
That due to Governor Wolf's mandated school closings and stay-at-home order as a result of COVID-19, this will be a virtual meeting via Zoom webinar. Nick Sepp will serve as host of tonight's virtual meeting. The IT help desk is available during the meeting if the community encounters technical difficulties. Their number is 814-231-7743. A few notes to meeting participants. When board or community members want to make a comment or ask a question, please use the raise hand feature in the Zoom program accessed under the participants tab. The host will lower hands and mute or unmute speakers as necessary to assist with the flow of the meeting. Pursuant to our board policy 3, at least 5 board members shall be present in the boardroom, 4 of whom must be physically present, with the 5th and our additional members able to participate remotely. As a result of the global pandemic, all board members are participating remotely. Since policy 9 provides that where discretion is directly and or by implication granted to the board may depart from policy. Given the extraordinary times and circumstances that we find ourselves in, the board is choosing to exercise its discretion and depart and Policy 3's requirements of at least 4 board members being physically present. The board will continue to monitor the situation and make decisions on a case-by-case basis to continue or not with meetings in this manner. The board will return to strict adherence with Policy 3 as soon as possible.
At this time, I'd like to call on our board secretary to do a roll call for board members who are present.
Dr. Bader,
Present.
Ms. Bedell,
Here.
Ms. Brandt,
Here.
Ms. Concepcion,
Here.
Dr. Duffy,
Here.
Mr. Fazard. I believe he's, no, okay. Mr. Hutchinson,
Here.
Mr. Leos,
Here.
Ms. Zidney. Laurel,
Not on.
she might be,
Do see
you're muted.
she's muted. That's what it is. She's on the participant list right now.
Yep, okay.
Okay. Well, we will move on at this time to communications on our agenda. And I'd like to call on Dr. O'Donnell. He's going to be giving an update on remote learning and some superintendent recognitions.
Sorry about that. It's Teacher Appreciation Week this week, and more than ever, I want to thank our faculty for their passion for education and their commitment to our students. Transitioning to remote learning has been challenging in many respects, but our teachers have risen to the occasion and with creative approaches and have shown once again that they are the heart of our school district. Thank you for all of your caring and dedication to our faculty. I'm proud to be your colleague, and our community is fortunate to have you educating our students. Last Thursday, I was honored to participate in a heartwarming celebration for 6 graduating LifeLink PSU students. In place of the usual commencement ceremony on the Penn State campus, 25 decorated cars, a fire engine, and 3 police cruisers traveled to their homes. While Kool and the Gang's celebration played, students received overstuffed gift baskets and pasta dinners. It was fantastic to see that kind of support and love from so many people. Kudos to the special education department and other organizers for creating a special tribute and lifetime memories. Ellen Canizaro, the teacher of the LifeLink program, spearheaded it all, and I'd like to thank her personally. Well, we can't replicate the neighborhood parade for our graduating seniors at State High. Unless we had weeks to spare, we do have some memorable experiences planned for them. In addition to offering a drive-in viewing at State High of our virtual commencement ceremony, we're providing students with the option of having their diplomas delivered to their homes by a favorite teacher or principal. We've also added a senior send-off parade to the plans where K-12 teachers and employees from around the district will be on campus to cheer students as they drive past in the back of the high school parking lot. We're working out the details of those plans, and families should expect information from Curtis Johnson either tomorrow or Wednesday, as he'll be sending that out. For the end of this school year, we're finalizing how K-12 students will be able to return district property and obtain their personal items from schools, and we will share that with parents and students in the near future. Regarding our summer programs, we have still not finalized our decisions as circumstances continue to change, but we will communicate that out as soon as we finalize plans. I have received some communications regarding our position on school district grounds. Right now, our position remains the same. However, we are reviewing what we'll be doing with the upcoming changes being made in our community. We'll reflect on our practices, obviously keep safety concerns at the forefront, and we'll share any changes to the position that we've shared out regarding our grounds. At that time, I know Will Stout's on the call. If there's any questions you have about graduation, I know he's involved with more of the detail with CJ. I know that we've shared out what was sent out to families last time with the board, as well as the addition tonight of sharing the idea that came from discussion with students around the senior send-off parade, which we're hoping the date for that will probably be in late May. So if you have any questions of me regarding those, I know
I
Will.
see Kim Leas has a question.
Actually, I had a communication for later. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
I'll put it down.
If there are no questions, that's all I have, Amber.
Okay, thank you. Jim, what would you like to share your communication? There?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, so as some of you know, my graduate degree is from the Eberly College of Science at Penn State. And I noticed in the announcement that So-Young Kim and Kyler Luck have been selected as the student marshals to represent the graduating class of the Eberly College. Marshals are chosen on the basis of their academic research and service success. And I will note that both are alums of State High. So congratulations to Kyler and So-Young. Thank you.
Right, that's great. Congratulations. At this time, we have time for the legislative update. David, would you like to share anything regarding legislation?
Well, I just wanted to correct something that I said at a last meeting. Apparently, the bill to freeze property tax increases statewide is gaining new life again. It's still being resisted in Harrisburg, but it's a consideration for a lot of school districts that don't have options. Obviously, everyone here very well knows that our expenses have not dropped, but our resources have. And so it's really a challenging situation for school districts. So we'll keep you updated on that. I don't know what the status of it at the moment is. I don't know if anyone else wants to address this, but we can now, it's probably not a bad time, given what I just said, for us to give real thought to passing a board resolution favoring charter school, changes to the charter school law. And so several of us are working on that. So hopefully that's something we can bring forward soon.
Yeah, I know. Of course, we had passed a resolution earlier in 2020, but with the changing circumstance, there's been some discussion among school leaders in Pennsylvania about resolutions that might more directly address the circumstances with the COVID-19 epidemic and how it's affected district budgets. So that's something I think we'll be looking to bring to our finance committee in the near future. Okay, Gretchen, with the Center Region Council of Governments report.
Yeah, so the General Forum has not met, or the Executive Council that's meeting on behalf of the forum. However, there are a few updates. I think people are already aware curbside recycling resumed on April 27th, so there's recycling again at your curb. Also, Center County will be in yellow status as of Friday, May 8th, and that does change some things for Center Parks and Rec. So they will not be offering any programming events or leagues. However, restrooms at the parks will be open on starting May 11th. There will be no water fountains. The sport courts and fields will be open starting May 11th. But again, no organized youth or adult sports groups, large events, tournaments, or leagues will be permitted. And that's it.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we have time for public comment on our agenda. If anyone would like to make a comment, please state your name and where you're from. Each individual is limited to comments of up to 3 minutes, as time permits, for items on the agenda or related to board business. Is anyone here on the meeting looking to make a public comment? Okay, I don't see any participants who have a hand raised. So then we will move on to routine approvals. And if just a reminder to board members, when you do make a motion during these online meetings, if you could just state your name at the time you make the motion, for that way the minutes can be accurately reflecting. So at this time, I'd like a motion to approve the routine approval listing as presented on the agenda.
Jim Leas, so moved.
Lori Bedell, second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Do we have any questions or discussion regarding the routine approvals? I don't see any hands raised. So then we'll go ahead and have a roll call vote.
Ms. Zidney,
Yes.
Dr. Bader,
Yes.
Ms. Bedell,
Yes.
Ms. Brandt,
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion,
Yes.
Dr. Duffy,
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson,
Yes.
Mr. Leos.
Yes.
Okay, so that item has passed. The next item on the agenda is moving on to action items. Item A is a motion to approve revised policy 216, student records. And you can see this on the agenda in attachment 6.
Amber, I think policy 001 is first.
Oh, okay. On the version of the,
Thought I have to.
I print out.
Am I wrong? If I'm wrong, I'm sorry.
It may be, I'm working from the printout. We have 2 copies of it.
Oh,
We have a Google Doc that we use in agenda planning, so I'm gonna
Okay.
go to the,
The Zoho one.
okay, so then for item A, is there a motion to approve policy 001, name and classification? And this would be action item 6A.
Duffy, so moved.
Leah, second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussion? Sorry, I'm looking for, just to make sure I'm not missing any hands raised. Okay, seeing no discussion, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Dr. Bader,
yes.
Ms. Bedell,
Yes.
Ms. Brandt,
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion,
Yes.
Dr. Duffy,
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson,
Yes.
Mr. Leos,
Yes.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Okay, so that item has passed. Then item B will be policy 216, student records. This is shown in attachment 6B.
Lori Bedell, so moved.
Duffy, second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion or any questions on this item? Okay, we will have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Bedell,
Yes.
Ms. Brandt,
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion,
Yes.
Dr. Duffy,
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson,
Yes.
Mr. Leos,
Yes.
Ms. Zidney,
Yes.
Dr. Bader.
Yes.
Okay, so that motion has passed. Item C is a motion to approve the agreement with Herf Jones LLC for virtual graduation professional services. This is shown in attachment 6C.
Leah, so moved.
Bader, second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. And questions or discussion on this item?
Could we hear just a little bit about it?
Sure, and I see Laurel has her hand up as well. I had one question on it. Laurel, did you want to ask did you have a specific question?
Basically just hearing more about it and how they were
Okay.
selected and what it is for. Thanks.
Will,
I'll talk about that. As you all know, we're moving to a virtual commencement this year because of the pandemic. And so we were forced to look at several different companies. The one company that we had taken a look at, they're in the sports marketing business, and they were trying to diversify, given there aren't many athletics going on right now. And we had given them a look, but in the end, we decided to go with Herf Jones, and in particular, the company Marching Order. Marching Order is the company that Penn State is using for their virtual commencement. They've been in the commencement business for a lot of years, and they are a reputable company. I know we put in the memo today what the cost would be, but just to break it down further, it's about $9 per graduate is what they're charging us. It will be a slideshow. Students will be able to pronounce their name into the system so that we don't mess up on how the names are read during commencement. So we feel pretty comfortable and pretty confident in this company. We didn't really want to take any risks with an unknown given our first time with virtual commencement.
Okay. One question I did have about it says that the audio and video would be available for a year. Is that, are students able to download so that they can keep it for posterity?
Yeah, we had a conversation about that today, and we believe so. We do need to follow up with the company just to make sure that within that time frame, that students or families can download it so that they can have it long term. So we will double check on that.
Okay, that seems important. So.
Yeah. Our initial thoughts were that yes, they would have that capability, but until we confirm it with the company, I don't want to confirm that.
Okay, understandable. Any other questions, Jim? Did you have any questions?
Yeah, just along the same lines, does the school district will the school district get an archival copy of it for our records?
I believe so if we choose to download it, which I think we will do. But again, we'll follow up. We just received the contract, I believe, last Thursday, and we wanted to get it to the board for approval because this takes several weeks to put together. So any of those minor details, we will certainly check on those.
Thanks.
Okay.
My understanding was that we would own the video, and yes, that families would have access to download. But we'll confirm that, and that obviously is a huge priority for us, so that families can have that file.
Right. Great. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions or any public comment on this item? Okay. Then we will have a roll call vote.
Ms. Brandt,
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion, Ms. Concepcion.
I'm sorry. Yes. I
Okay.
put on mute.
That's okay. Dr. Duffy,
Yes.
Mr. Hutchinson,
Yes.
Mr. Leos,
Yes.
Ms. Zidney,
Yes.
Dr. Bader,
Yes.
Ms. Bedell.
Yes.
Okay. That item has passed then. The next item on the agenda, moving forward to information and discussion, is fiscal stewardship budget development. This is shown in attachment 7A. And we have Randy Brown and Donna Watson here to present an update on the budget development process.
I'm going to just open up and then turn it over to Randy and Donna. You know, as we look at this evening's budget discussion, we have three primary points. First, we wanted to provide the board an opportunity to ask some additional questions regarding all the information that we shared last week. Obviously, much has changed since we first started our budget development. The second, in response to last week's discussion, Randy and Donna will review comparisons of our revenue and expenses to local county as well as cohort districts this evening. The third point, as we look to the May 12th finance meeting, we'll plan for potential refinements to projections as well as share more information regarding our planning so that how we're going to finalize this budget with you in a balanced manner prior to your action. Please know that when we make staffing decision regarding any of the open positions that we have, because we've been holding, we want to understand as much information as possible. Therefore, some of those decisions will absolutely have to occur later than June 30th. Some of the reasons for that relate to what our status will be for the fall, as well as student enrollment, and obviously the status of our region's economy. So we'll talk more about that in finance, but the discussion tonight will help guide us with some of the additional expectations from the board or what the board desires as we plan for that May 12th discussion, and then to return to the full board on the 18th. So we ask that you remember our current proposal presumes that Penn State students return to campus this fall. Also, our proposal includes a priority to limit the impact on student experiences. With that, we're developing different scenarios of what school could look like in the fall. We will obviously look to the information coming to us from the CDC, PA Department of Health in our region and district's health professionals. In regard to the budget, as we learn more about the economic impacts of the pandemic, which includes decisions of Penn State, state legislature, as well as other economic drivers, we'll modify this proposal and also build our contingency proposal as necessary. At this time, I'll turn it over to Randy and Donna for their update, as well as to help us facilitate our discussion and answer any questions from the board. So thank you, Randy.
Thank you, Dr. O'Donnell. As we're waiting for the presentation to be displayed for you, I'd like to ask if there's any follow-up from the April 27th meeting that you'd like to ask now at this time, or make sure that we cover it if at all possible, or at least we, at a minimum, we can get ready for a future discussion. So is there anything from last time? Nabil, you can put the presentation out, please. Okay. As Dr. O'Donnell said, that then we will be looking at a lot tonight at local, county, and cohort district comparisons. And we are also preparing for our May 12th finance meeting where we have further financial projections and contingency funding discussions planned. If you go to slide 4, please. We wanted to explain to you and provide a little bit more detail about our county cohorts. This first graph on slide 4 shows that although all 4 of our budgets are very different, in large part, or at least 50% of the local county districts are funded locally, with Bald Eagle being the lowest, and then Bellefonte and Penns Valley are fairly close at around 60% or so, and then we're at about 80%. This slide 5 shows those that same information, just in a percentage form at the bottom of the table. This came from a follow-up question from last week, so that's why we wanted to provide it. If we move on to the next slide, this is just showing in detail the local revenue, and what this shows is that between 92 and 96%, I'm sorry, 93 and 96% of all of the local county school districts' revenue comes from either real estate or earned income tax, or what that are levied by the districts. Moving on to 7, we're going to go on to our cohort enrollments, cohort districts now, and we're going to start with a listing of the various enrollments for these districts. They're listed alphabetical, and we currently have the lowest enrollment for this current year that the data is provided, which is 6808, and it goes up to 9445, which was at Parkland. Moving on to slide 8. We're going to look at the revenue again, local, state, federal, and other. And you can see that, again, we are, all of these cohort districts are hovering right around the 80% mark for our local revenue. If you move on to the next slide, please. You can see that the percentages range from 74%, 74.9 as a low, to it looks like 85.1 as a high. Next slide takes a look at the local revenue again. Although that appears to be a lot of variation, notice that the scale on the axis is starting at 93% and going to 100%. So those variation points are actually in tenths of a percent, and they range from a low, it looks like, of just under 95% to in the 97% range. So they're very similar. Moving on to slide 11. Now we're in the expenses for our cohort districts. And as you may or may not remember, we tend to look at our expenses in 2 different ways. One is by function, and those functions are 1,000 instruction, 2,000 support services, 3,000 operation of non-instructional services, 4,000 are facilities and acquisitions, and then 5,000 are other expenses and financing uses. So when you look at all of those 5 functions together, obviously right around 60% for all districts is the instruction function or the instruction expenses. Support services vary a little bit, but they're hovering between 28 and 33%. And then the other areas are even much smaller. On slide 12, we removed the functions 4,000 and 5,000 because those can be anomalies depending on how districts, if they're refinancing, if they're completing projects, or if they choose to record expenses in the general fund, which is what we're looking at, or if they're looking at expending them from capital accounts. So just looking at 1, 2, and 3,000 functions, you can see that our expenses are very, very similar in those 3 functions. Moving on to slide 13. Here we're looking at just instructional expenses, and we're looking at, and again, there's a breakdown there. 1,100 of the blue, with the majority of the expenses in this function is the regular programs, elementary and secondary. And then it goes through a series of other types of programs, special programs, vocational education, other instructional, etc. And again, there is some slight variation amongst those, but pretty much in the 70% range for all of them, for all of the districts for the regular programs. And then in the mid-20s for most of the districts in the special programs. Moving on to slide 14, we look at the 2,000 functions, which is the support services. And again, we see some variation along here, but for the most part, there is a lot of similarities across the board. Slide 15, we look at the other component, or the other view of expenses, which is by major object. These are our typical expense items which accountants use and we discuss. 1 and 200s have been combined here as our personnel costs. 300s are professional services. 400 are purchase services. 500 other purchase services. 600 supplies and property. 800 are other objects and other uses. Again, we see a little bit of variation here by percentage when we look at all of the expense objects. In the next slide, slide 16, we'll see that the percentage differences do change a little bit whenever we remove the 800 and 900 series. And again, that can be related to financing and use of a contingency and transfers to other funds, which can have a lot more variability across districts. So we wanted to give you this view as well. There is some slight variation, but generally speaking, we are in the ballpark with a lot of our other districts. Moving on to slide 17, wanted to specifically talk about, it wouldn't be a budget discussion if we didn't talk about charter school expense in this district. And I'm here just to speak of it as a fact that in 17-18, which is when this data was pulled from all of the other districts, our charter school tuition was $6.7 million. We can look across our cohorts that this is something that is very dissimilar across our districts, across our cohort. Obviously, the other districts do not have as much expense, Parkland being the next closest at more than $2 million less expense than we do in charter school expense. Charter school expenses in a other purchase service account, and if you look at slide 18, you can see the component of charter school expense as a component of the other purchase service expenses. And so I just showed you this in graphical form. On slide 19, we'll look at 2 additional components of other purchase services, which can vary and can cause some significant variance in districts depending on how they handle certain things. The bright orange color, which would be right next to the blue, is contracted carriers, and that's for student transportation. And you'll see that everyone has contracted carrier expense except for Parkland, so they must have an entirely in-house transportation fleet. We do have some contracted carrier expense, but we also have a fleet. So if we were looking at all of our transportation costs, that would only a portion is reflected here. In the gray area, you can see all but State College has the gray area, and that is for Career and Technology Center expenses. And my guess is that none of these have completely in-house CTCs as we do. And that's why they have that additional variance. So although there is some variance in cost in across the districts in some of these in total. I felt it was necessary to look at these components just to have an understanding of why those variances were existed. And then our last slide for tonight, graphical slide, would be fund balance by a percentage. And although State College does have the lowest fund balance percentage at the end of 2017-18, this is just or only representing the general fund balance. We have at 2017-18, I'm sorry, I believe it's at 2019. I don't have the 18 number with me, but in 2019 on our financial statements, we had $65 million in capital reserve fund balance. So we have designated our fund balance for capital projects and transferred it to a separate fund. That's not saying that some of these other districts have not also done that, but just giving you, don't want you to be concerned that we had the lowest fund balance represented here. This is just the general fund. We have other fund balances available. And moving on to the next slide, this is our timeline just to refresh. And this has changed since the last board meeting because at the last meeting, we were talking about a finance committee meeting being on May 7th, and now we've moved it to May 12th. So that it's a little bit closer to the May 18th meeting and we can be prepared on both sides of the finance meeting, preparing for it, and then also giving us time to prepare for the board meeting should there be additional comments, questions, or concerns related. Obviously, every moment of every day is very important in our budget planning right now, waiting for information from the state, the economy, and obviously Penn State as well, just to understand what we are working with and how we are moving forward and how we are going to need to respond. So you can close the presentation so that we can see if there's others that have questions. Thank you. Is there any questions or comments?
I see Laurel and Lori both have a hand up. Lori, do you want to go ahead?
Just two things. First of all, Randy, I think for the sake of the community, it's always useful. We talk about it all the time, but for clarity, could you just define cohort districts and why it's beneficial for us to look at those as comparable points of reference as opposed to our county partners? And then the second question is, in looking at this material, how does this help you to think about our budget? Is there conversation that happens with you and our cohort districts, or what is it that when I'm looking at this, I'm trying to understand how this helps us to think about our own budget in this particular time? Those are my two.
Sure. So the first question for the community standpoint, or to remind everyone here, these cohorts were chosen many years ago, a number of years ago, and they are based upon economics, the economic aid ratio, their wealth of the district, their size, based upon student enrollment. There may be others that are closer to us in some of those components, but these were selected because in all of the various components that we looked at, they fit most similarly to us as a district. And why we choose these districts to look at in addition to or sometimes rather than our county school districts is a simple fact that we saw based upon the budgets of the county school districts, they are not comparable. We are much larger. In fact, our budget and our number of students is larger than the three of them combined. And so when we're looking at some revenue dollar comparisons, when we're looking at expense comparisons, when different things from a financial lens, the local communities and local districts are not always comparable, even though we know that the geographic bounds of our school district has employers that support residents of those districts. It's just that those communities themselves, by the boundaries of their school district, are not as comparable to our school district. What do those comparisons that we made tonight, especially on the cohort side, tell us as a part of the finance and part of the district is Well, on the revenue side, there was not a lot of variations. And that told me that we are very, very similar. And so if we had a problem, if we had a question, they would be good resources for us to call upon to understand how they handled a situation. They're locally funded. They're strongly funded locally by their real estate tax, their earned income tax. They may not have the same industry. They may not have the same geographic, composition, but there's still a lot of similarities from that standpoint. On the expense side, there's also a lot of similarities. And although we all have different union contracts, different benefit options, as I said, we have a in-house CTC, others probably do not. We do contracted carriers as well as in-house transportation. Some of them may have the mix, or they may have one or the other. But on the instructional and support side, given their different size from us, given that they come from different economic areas, we believe that looking at the expenses, that we're pretty comparable. If we've found a lot of outliers, and that's why we mentioned the other purchase services and looked at that a little bit more, because we saw some variation there. If we wanted to understand, and we removed the other financing uses and other expenditures because there was some anomalies there. We felt that we understood what they probably were and didn't need any additional information. But if they didn't make sense to us, we could pick up the phone and give them a call to make sure that we're not missing something. So I think that probably it wraps it up. Does that help, Mrs. Bedell?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Randy.
Thank you.
Okay, Laurel?
Thanks, Randy. I wanted to go back just quickly to the revenue.
Sure.
And it's a small percentage, but it's significantly higher than other districts. What types of things make up the other local revenue? It's like, it's only 1% of our budget, but that's a lot more of a percent than it is for some of the others. I'm just curious what those are.
Other local revenue?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you said? Okay. Donna, do you know that off the top of your head? I apologize for putting you on the spot, but
one of the greatest things that we have in local revenue is our tuition for our SEAL program. But it's tuition, it's donations, the amount that we get from the IU for our IDEA, things like that. And I'm just trying to get to 18 really quickly here to see if we had other large items there, but those are the main items.
so again, looking at the tuition and knowing that we have a strong community education program, which includes our before and after school SEAL program, many other districts may or may not have that same type of a program where they may allow a contractor to come in and offer that program in their school buildings.
Okay, it was one of those things that had jumped out at me. And I think you answered the other one, which is wondering what some of the purchase services are in some of the other districts, and you addressed that.
Okay.
All right, other questions? Okay, Randy, any other parts of the budget development that you would like to highlight?
So I just want to let you know that we are working, although this really didn't help build our budget, it is something that allows us to put into concrete more our understanding of where we're spending our money and are we aligned. We are working very hard for that finance committee meeting next Tuesday, where we hope to provide additional level of detail in our budget proposal, which, I'm dividing it into two, current and more of a worst case, should things go into a different scenario. And as far as current budget proposal, looking at getting back to some normalcy being back in session, Penn State back in session, but also building in some contingencies of what does the new normal look like? What are some things that we're going to need to have resources for that we haven't had to in the past, and trying to quantify specifically items that we may think that are necessary, or actions and operations that are going to be necessary, as well as building in those other dollars. Again, looking for ways that we can save resources and understand those as well. So there's a lot of work going on, and if you know, obviously that's an important meeting, and then 7 days later we're going to have another meeting with you as a board where we asked you to approve a proposed final budget that doesn't have to look the same as your final budget, but as you prepare, as you think, as you research and analyze or whatever, I really would ask that through your board leadership you pose questions or anything or concerns, so that they can filter those through to us, to Bob and I, because we would rather have more information and more advanced notice because of the volumes of things that we're trying to work through right now. That's all.
Great. Any other questions from board members? Okay, then I guess we will move on to item B on the agenda. It's under the category student learning. We'll be looking at the Young Scholars of Central PA charter school renewal process. And this is shown in attachment 7B.
Amber, I think Laurel has a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Laurel.
Yeah, one other question on the presentation from Randy, which was the fund balance, because so many of them were higher than ours, but my understanding was that we had to be at around 8%, which is what we were showing. And I was just curious, really what's going on with the other districts and why they can be so much higher.
So we were talking about just the general fund balance.
Right.
You are correct. And there are multiple components of fund balance. Our largest block in in the graph for our value is the red, and that is unassigned or unrestricted. Then we also have orange fund balance, which is committed for our PSERS liability. Most of the other school districts that have larger fund balances than the district have already committed theirs. And so when you move fund balance to committed, it can exceed the 8%. The 8% cap is only on the unassigned.
Okay, I'm sure you've explained it before. Some of them were really, really high. And one district in particular, I know there have been some issues with that. And I like what I see in terms of ours, that we've got a cushion, but not
right.
excessive storing.
And again, as I mentioned, we have a capital reserve fund that has a fund balance, and we have significant dollars there. I do remember, I don't remember which district in particular, but one of the districts, they committed theirs for capital expenses as well as for ongoing operations. So it was committed, but it was just committed in a different way.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, it took me a while to get unmuted and all.
That's okay. So then we will move on to item B, the Young Scholars renewal process.
I'll kick us off there. I'm gonna share an overview of our report. Obviously, there's quite a number of attachments there. We have several members of our team that did details of the review with us this evening. So once I go through the overview, then we'll open it up to field your questions. I think Nabil was going to share the presentation here on the page. Get that up. And Lynn will go ahead and we'll add this to the agenda if we haven't yet. Although we don't have oversight of charter schools, this particular charter school, Young Scholars, we've been collaborating with them more during recent years, obviously with transitions of students from our community. When I get to enrollment, you'll see about half of their population is our resident students. Just within the past couple of months, during spring break, I collaborated with Levant just to have him help him understand where we were with our thinking with the remote learning plan. I know they have a similar model in place at this time. I know now more than ever, we're supporting families who have questions about exceptionalities beyond special education, that is gifted and talented questions from families, where our psychologists and our director for our gifted services, Jonathan Klingman, collaborate with families and the Young Scholars Administration, using our culturally proficient evaluation process to provide information to those families, just to help with being more responsive. We also have had some of their students involved with athletics and extracurricular activities that they do not provide students. So that all helps with the relationship between those families and both of our school communities, and helps with those transitions. As per our memo, what we are proposing is that you approve this charter renewal on May 18th, and I'll get into a little bit more regarding that. In the next slide, the process for renewal that we looked at, and then I'll speak to what Dr. Etter usually shares every time we have a renewal come to the board. Looking at a 5-year period, we did an on-site visit in late fall, and have had follow-up conversations with Levant and his team regarding any additional questions or documents to request. Our board, several members of the board accompanied me and several of the district administrators in February to visit the school, where we met with folks from the intermediate unit who head up the special education services, as well as a teacher who shared some of the components of their core curriculum and what they've done. On May 4th, obviously we're bringing this report, and then May 18th. So that's our timeline that we're looking at here. On the next slide, in regard to the procedures, and this is really coming from, what parameters we have, and I'll have Dr. Etter, highlight. He'll be able to respond to any of your questions this evening. I know we've had this discussion before regarding what our role is and what parameters we have as a board. In regard to enrollment, they have a little over 400 students, about half of their student population, as I said. The remainder of their population is spread among several other districts, not simply just our county districts. Moving on to faculty certification, we provided information for 51 professional staff. They do meet the state staffing requirements. Some of them, obviously 10 teachers not holding proper certification for their particular role. Several of those were teachers in their world language program. Obviously, we know that finding teachers for Mandarin is difficult, and they do as well. So some of those teachers fell in that area. Just for the record, 100% of our faculty, including our Chinese teacher, are certified. In regard to faculty compensation, just to share, we look at all aspects of a financial picture, and when we look at teacher retention rates, we look at teacher compensation, because all the expenditures in SCASD that factor into what we have to pay per student to charter schools, we analyze that. Young Scholars ranks as one of the lowest education agencies in the state for teacher compensation, and our school district ranks in the top 20%. So, and as I said, we're based, we're required to pay per pupil expenditures, or pay per pupil, and that includes what we pay our employees in that formula. So it definitely raises questions, and it doesn't add up when you look at it for what we're paying them. So we do not have oversight, and I just want to make sure we're just sharing what we've identified with you. Although there's no doubt half of their student population comes from other school districts, so their economic factors do differ from ours. So I want to point that out, but there's no doubt when you look at it, you'd expect them to be compensated better than what we're seeing. As far as teacher turnover, I think that these two slides are really connected. When we look at, the ranking there, it's pretty low. And the reason that we raise that is obviously continuity of programs, including professional development investments in your faculty to impact student learning. It takes time. And that raised some concerns on our part regarding the teacher retention. We did look at student assessment information. The only information that we have for you does relate to the state standardized test that exists. There's these data points in our report, and I only included one chart. And we do have Vern with us and Will, who really took a look at this. It definitely raises questions. However, they have a different population. They have almost 13% more students coming from economically disadvantaged homes. And we all know that has a significant impact on any standardized testing data. So it raises questions, but again, we don't have that oversight to understand how their curriculum interfaces with this, as well as any of their interventions that they're employing based on student assessment information. We're using much more formative information to help with interventions than the state assessment. So please don't take this chart as the be all end all. And we just wanted to touch on, we have included student learning information, and there's more to the picture. Obviously, we know from our conversations about standardized assessments. A year ago, we sent $3.6 million to this charter school. And just to remind everyone, community, that we don't have oversight on how those funds are spent. Obviously, when we look to our legislators, we'll remind them of that, as well as share any suggestions we have that can help not have a negative impact on our community schools when we look at some of the aspects of charter law that we disagree with. For example, when we get to the finance committee meeting, I shared a little bit of information that superintendents from around the state are discussing, and one really just relates to one that we've had a discussion about our community, and that relates to the special education funding formula. Paying for the services that a student needs would be a more fair approach to that. So, I think when we get to that finance committee meeting, we'll be reflecting on this visit, as well as our other reports that we've shared with you for other charter schools, and trying to impact what makes sense with the state's requirements on us. So as I said earlier, the last slide here, we've requested that you approve the renewal on May 18th. And from everything we've learned through our collaboration with Levant and his team, looking through their programming and documentation, they do comply with Pennsylvania Charter School law. So with that, that's all I have for the overview. You have the much more detailed report that we've provided, as well as all the attachments, and our team's here to field any questions you might have this evening.
Okay. I'm just looking for raised hands on the listing here. Lori?
Yes, thank you. So just two things, I think. First of all, there's a lot of material here, and I really encourage the community to look through this, because I think that it's important to pay attention to the facts presented. And, if nothing else, it should certainly reignite the conversation that we have over and over again about charter school law and legislation. And so I just encourage the community to take a look at what we have here, and to look at what the laws are, and to perhaps become an advocate on this issue. But specifically, I have a question on page 17 of the 2018-2019 financial statement, and then on various other, on the other statements on various pages. There is noted a significant custodial credit risk due to a lack of depository interest. And in the latest statement that we have available to us, it's at $1.1 million. So two questions on that. What would be a reason not to have the insurance? It seems to be flagged as a concern in all of these financial statements. And then the second question is, how big of a concern is that to our district, and what is the impact? What would the impact be if those funds were to be lost?
Lori, can you tell me which page again on which year?
Sure. So on the latest, on 2018, 2019, on page 17 of the document, I guess that would be 19 in the PDF. So let me go to page.
Page 17, yeah.
Yeah, page 17.
Yep.
Yeah. So it just seems to be, the language in this seems to be something that we should be concerned with, and it's on all of the statements. And so I didn't know if there was a legitimate reason not to have this sort of insurance, if I just don't understand it, and wanted to know whether or not that should be a red flag for us. Is that, you know, if, and particularly given the current economic situation, if those funds are lost, what's the impact on the school district?
Well, let me first say that this finance team would never recommend or do something like this. And the school district has a policy against this. But this would be, you know, if the bank failure, if the financial institution would fail, then the statement in here is saying is that the school district or the school would be at risk for that $1.1 million. What does that mean to our school district? I don't think that it means anything. I don't think that there's any reason that that Young Scholars could come back against our school district or any of the sending school districts. I think this is just a way that they could lose their finances through a bank failure, and they would just have to make that up however that would be.
There wouldn't be any risk to the school district in the sense, Lori, that we would have to make up a loss, if that's what your question is driving at. I mean, to me, the risk potentially would be that the school closes itself and the students come back to us, which it's a planning risk for us, but it's a good financial issue, I suppose, because we're not paying $3 million then.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That just stuck out to me as confusing and concerning. Thanks.
The charter schools, as you know or would remember, are completely separate legal entities from us.
Right.
Depending upon the type of school, we have renewal or initial granting of the charter. But beyond that, our responsibility is very limited, and we certainly don't have any fiscal responsibility to them beyond paying whatever students from our district choose to attend there.
It seems like a school law is not to make sure that the funds that are being held are insured. Is that another failing somewhere, or?
Randy and Donna could speak to the issue better than I can, but there are certainly requirements that apply to public schools and other public entities about where and in what manner you can put your funds. So I'm presuming Randy and Donna can speak to the fact that while it might not be an ideal situation that they have, as you've just pointed out, and whomever wrote that wrote, but I'm presuming, since Randy and Donna aren't flagging it, that it's not something that violates whatever laws apply to that particular depository situation.
Okay. Yeah. It does seem, since these are all taxpayer dollars, that there should be some consistency in terms of expectations for that kind of financial security.
Exactly.
And on the part of the state. So. Scott, do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, I guess a couple comments, one or two questions. Echo Lori's comments relative to the situation that we have with charter school legislation. Similarly, I guess a question, quick question for Randy and Donna regarding finances. And if you look on page 17, as Lori was referencing, so they had revenues in excess of expenditures of almost $500,000 last year. So in the school district, if we have revenues in excess of expenditures, we are limited to the amount that we can maintain in our fund balance, and we put them into capital reserve because our capital projects are very, very large. I'm sorry, I said 17. It's page 9. Sorry. What are the requirements or lack thereof of a charter school who is effectively making $500,000? What are they doing with this profit that they are gaining from the taxpayers? You're on mute, Randy.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I believe that they are in the same fund balance consideration that we are. What are they, their revenue is solely based upon a tuition rate by charter school law, and therefore they have a choice to spend or not spend, and what they are building up those excess reserves, if they have any, for, I'm uncertain.
Yeah, and I mean, on the spend portion of it, I mean, it's very troubling when you see this picture that Young Scholars is painting for us, and that is, we're going to receive a tremendous amount of funding from State College. Half of their students are from State College. More than half of their revenue is from State College. Yet their achievements are well under State College and just barely over state averages. They have a very large lease from what I saw, about $500,000 a year, that has exceptionally favorable terms for the business owner. That is not market style leases in this area, where you have the tenant paying the rent and essentially 100% of all operating, maintenance, building costs, etc. So it's just a very troubling picture. And then, oh, by the way, there's the teacher salaries, which are paid almost half of what our teacher average is. And then you wonder why the results are what they are. And oh, by the way, they made $500,000 off the taxpayer. So it's just very troubling. It goes back to Lori's comment about the charter school legislation. As we all know, unfortunately, there's not a whole heck of a lot that we can do, because, as Bob very specifically said, we do not have oversight over these taxpayer dollars that we're being forced to spend. And it's just, I hope that the public hears this and is able to contact their representatives and try to push harder and harder for charter school reform, because this presentation and this information is a prime example of what's just doesn't seem fair in the system. So those are my one question and my couple of comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Gretchen?
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to just contribute to the conversation and make it clear to all the people in the past and in the future who will ask us, why do you vote yes to renew a charter school like this, when they look at all of the data that Scott was just referencing with achievement and teacher retention and all of these other issues. And I just wanted to briefly state clearly for everyone that, again, it's because of the Pennsylvania law about charter schools, and that because it's written the way that it is, we really have no other choice. as long as they're following the Pennsylvania charter school law. And that's what Dr. O'Donnell specifically put in that initial presentation, is that they are. And when we see that they are, then our hands are tied. So I just wanted to publicly state that and reiterate what other board members have already said about the issues with some of these points that have already been discussed. Thanks.
All right. Any other questions, comments? I think it's a good idea to look at some of the resolutions that PSBA and our district have passed in regard to requesting charter school reform. And Governor Wolf has a proposal for comprehensive charter reform, which I think our board resolution was largely consistent with the charter reform proposals that are out there at this time, particularly highlighting special education funding as really a major concern. Jim?
Yeah, I just ProPublica makes 990s, which are the IRS form that nonprofits have to file, makes those available for search, and including the most recent ones are usually about 2018. You know, they're sort of a year in arrears, and it's interesting to look for young scholars, for Dream Schools Incorporated of Pennsylvania, and for Newport Drive Properties of Pennsylvania. What the first two are 501c3s, and the second one is a 501c25, which appears to be a company that's able to hold leases for nonprofits. So just for your own edification, if you're listening at home, you might want to pull those 990s and take a look at them.
All right.
I just want to say thanks to the team for pulling all the detail together and, spending the time combing through all the information to prepare this for you. So, and thanks for board members for your questions and spending time understanding what we pulled together there. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on this item? We'll be expecting this to be back for a vote at our next meeting then. Okay. All right. Seeing none then, we are going to move on to looking at board committee meetings. We have some upcoming committee meetings. On May 12th, we have Finance and Audit Committee meeting. And then on the 14th, Facilities and Grounds. And detail will be on our website in regard to these items. Looking at future agenda planning for board meetings, we have the 2020-2021 proposed final budget and the 2020-2021 breakfast and lunch prices as action items at the May 18th meeting, as well as the proposal regarding renewing the Young Scholars Charter School charter. At this time, is there anything for future agenda planning from the board? If anything comes up regarding future agendas, feel free to send an email or call. And at this time, I'd like a motion to adjourn to executive session.
Scott Fazard.
Jim Lee, a second.
Okay, so that's been moved and seconded. All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, then we are adjourned. And board members, you can look for the link in your email for the executive session.